The LA Chargers find themselves at a crossroads right now. Their quick playoff exit exposed some serious holes in the roster. But hey, let's give credit where it's due. Coach Jim Harbaugh came in and got this team back to the playoffs for the first time since 2018. That's something to build on. Looking ahead to free agency, there's one name grabbing attention: J.K. Dobbins. This guy came in on a one-year prove-it deal, and while he showed some real flashes, those injury concerns kept popping up. So here's the big question. Should the Chargers bring him back or let him test the market? Let's dig into this. What's up, buddies? Welcome back. If you are new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We cover all AFC West news here on this channel. All right, before we get into all the contract stuff, let's look at what Dobbins brought to the table in 2024. Even in a backfield where they rotated guys in and out, his numbers jump off the page. We're talking 905 rushing yards on just 195 carries. That's an incredible 4.6 yards every time he touches the ball. And get this, he punched it into the end zone 9 times on the ground. Speaking of making plays, let's talk about his efficiency. Week 1 against the Raiders, Dobbins went absolutely crazy. 135 yards on just 10 carries. That's 13.5 yards per attempt. Just ridiculous numbers. Then he backs it up against Carolina with another huge day. 131 yards on 17 carries. And these weren't just stat padding games either. The Chargers needed both of these wins badly. Now here's where things get a bit complicated. Sure, Dobbins showed he can break games open. I mean, he had a 61-yard run and multiple games averaging over 6 yards per carry. That's explosive. But those injury concerns that got him that prove-it deal, they didn't completely go away. Looking at the numbers, he had 5 games with fewer than 15 carries. That tells me they were either managing his workload or dealing with some availability issues. When it comes to the passing game, Dobbins showed he can be a reliable option. He caught 32 passes out of 38 targets for 153 yards. But here's what really jumps out at me. 0 fumbles. Think about that. 195 carries plus 32 catches, and he never put the ball on the ground once. For a running back looking to get paid, that kind of ball security is pure gold. Now, here's the big question, or should I say the multi-million-dollar question. What is the market value of this young guy? So let's talk the money now, because these numbers are wild. SpotRack's projecting Dobbins' market value at $7.3 million a year. We're looking at something like 3 years, $22 million. That's a huge leap from the $1.6 million he made in 2024. But does the production match that price tag? Let's look at the numbers. If we're talking bang for your buck in 2024, Dobbins delivered big time. Do the math. Each rushing yard cost the Chargers $1,767, and they paid about $178,000 per touchdown. When you really dig into what he did with those 195 carries, it gets interesting. All season long, Dobbins showed he can break a game open at any moment. 4 different times he averaged over 6 yards per carry in a game, and that 61-yard run, that's the kind of play that changes games. He proved he can be the guy you lean on. 9 games with over 50 rushing yards, plus those multi-touchdown games. That Cleveland game where he punched in 2 scores, that was huge in getting that win. Now, this is where the contract talk gets really interesting. Yeah, the raw numbers look good, but let's talk about how they used him. His biggest workload came against Denver with 25 carries, but that wasn't the norm. 6 games with fewer than 15 carries? That's going to make some teams think twice about throwing big money at a long-term deal. And we can't ignore what happened in that playoff game against Houston. Look, 26 yards on 9 carries isn't what you want to see in a big game. Now, one game doesn't tell the whole story, but you better believe teams are going to bring that up during negotiations. When you stack up that projected $7.3 million against what he actually did, maintaining 4.6 yards per carry and never fumbling the ball, hey, that could be money well spent. But here's the thing about the NFL these days. The running back market is about as predictable as a coin flip. Let's look at the complete picture of what Dobbins did in 2024. In 13 games, he put up 905 yards and hit pay dirt 9 times. But those numbers alone don't tell you everything. The really impressive part is how he got those numbers. Looking at the game logs, there were times when his efficiency was just off the chart. Like that Raiders game, 13.5 yards per carry, that's video game. And how about Carolina, where he turned 17 carries into 131 yards? That's just pure dominance. You know what people don't talk about enough with Dobbins? His complete game. Sure, he can run the ball, but check this out. 32 catches on 38 targets. That's an 84% catch rate. Add in his ability to pass protect, and we're talking about a true 3-down back. In today's NFL, those guys are getting harder and harder to find. Here's another angle to consider. Age. At 26, this guy should be entering his prime years. Factor in that he was a second-round pick, plus what he showed us in 2024. And there's a really interesting contract possibility here. Maybe structure it around playing time incentives. That way, Dobbins gets paid when he's out there making plays, and the team doesn't get burned if those availability issues pop up again. Let me tell you about this stretch in the middle of the season where Dobbins just went off. From week 8 to week 12, he was showing everything in his toolkit. Take that Cleveland game, 85 yards on 14 carries. That's 6.1 yards per carry against one of the league's toughest run defenses. Then he starts finding the end zone regularly, including those 2 massive touchdowns against Cincinnati. Now, let's talk about something that can't be ignored. Staying on the field. The numbers here tell a story that any team, including the Chargers, needs to look at real close. His rookie year looked great, played 15 games. After that, it's been up and down, no way around it. When you really break down the 2024 game log, you can see how they were managing his snaps. It's pretty clear that after those big workload games like Denver, where he went for 96 yards on 25 carries, they'd pull back. Look at what happened in the Kansas City game, down to 14 carries for just 32 yards. They were definitely being careful with him. That playoff game against Houston, that might tell us everything we need to know. In a win-or-go-home situation, he only got 9 carries for 26 yards. When you're thinking about dropping $7.3 million a year on a running back, seeing numbers like that in the biggest game of the year, that's going to make you think twice. And this isn't just about missing games. It's about whether you can count on steady production through a long season plus playoffs. Even in what was probably his healthiest season recently in 2024, they had to carefully manage his workload just to keep him on the field. So what's the play here? Let's look at these numbers one more time. A 2 to 3 year deal loaded with incentives? That could be the sweet spot. Look, when Dobbins was right in 2024, he showed he can be explosive. 4.6 yards per carry isn't just good. That's top-tier stuff. Just look at the games where he was fully healthy. Week 1 against Vegas. Goes off for 135 yards on only 10 carries. Carolina game. Dominates with 131 yards on 17 attempts. Then that Cleveland game where he racks up 85 yards on just 14 carries. These aren't just good games we're talking about. This is the kind of potential that can change an entire offense. Check this out. Looking at his 2024 snap counts, something really interesting shows up. In games where they kept his carries around 15 or less, that's when his yards per carry often went through the roof, like that Cincinnati game. 11 carries, 56 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That's the kind of efficiency you can keep up when you're smart about the rotation. You know what's really interesting? How perfectly he fits into Harbaugh's system. 0 fumbles all season, catching 84% of his target. That shows he can be that reliable piece in a system that uses multiple backs. The numbers are telling us something here. He's at his best when he's that high-impact rotational guy, rather than trying to be the workhorse every single down. Let's wrap this up. 905 yards, 9 touchdowns, 4.6 yards per carry. The talent is clearly still there. Dobbins can still be a game changer, but it all comes down to being smart about how you use him and structure that contract. Get that performance-based deal right, and we might see his best football yet. All right, that's all I've got for you today. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Would you roll the dice on Dobbins with an incentive-heavy contract? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more NFL contract breakdowns, and I'll catch you next time.